Just a few words of introduction for Miss Valerie. Valerie is a consummate professional at what she does. She knows this business up and down and sideways. And that's as much as I'm going to say about her professional. But what I want to talk about is her heart, because she knows of what we are all going through. Not only is she a consummate professional, she's a parent. And that to me says a whole lot, because she can answer questions that we don't even know that we want to ask. So without further ado.
And thank you all for being here. I'm actually going to share my screen. My name is Valerie Baker, and I am a special needs consultant and a chartered special needs analyst. I do have a 24-year-old son. His name is Derek, and he has Down syndrome. And I also have two daughters, not to slight them. My daughter Jenna is 28, and my baby Katie is 20. But Derek is the reason that I left mortgage after being in the mortgage business for 20 years to move over into financial services about 12 or 13 years ago. Because there wasn't many people out there who were helping families like mine. And so I got into this business as a financial advisor so that I could help families like mine. So what we're going to talk about today really is a question that came to my mind, shortly after Derek was born. He was born in 1997. And, once I had my aha come to Jesus meeting, and I said, okay, I'm in, we're going to ride this roller coaster, whatever it looks like. One of the first things that I thought about was, who's going to take care of him when I'm not here anymore? And so that's really what we're going to talk about today. I think everybody's situations are different, and nothing that I tell you is 100% for every single person, but I think it certainly applies to the majority of the situations. And I'm very happy to meet with anybody on an individual basis, on a complimentary basis, just to talk about your particular situation. So I'll give you my contact information when this is over if anybody wants to have a conversation about your specific situation. The attorneys always get paid. I tell people that no matter what we're doing, the attorneys always get paid. So these are my disclosures. So here's really kind of the crux of the situation. I'm going to basically assume all of you are parents because it's just easier to have the conversation. But this person with Down syndrome may be a grandchild or a sister or a brother. All of these things still apply. So we're going to come back to this quiz a couple different times. So the first question is, have you left more than $2,000 to your dependent with special needs in your will or trust? Have you identified a future care provider? And is your dependent with special needs listed as a beneficiary on your life insurance or retirement? If you've answered yes to any of those questions, you might need to do some additional planning. So we're going to start, and we're really going to tackle the legal and financial stuff first, and really the legal stuff first. And I think this is a place where a lot of people have questions. So the three main areas of the legal side that we're going to talk about are wills and trusts and guardianship or conservatorship, guardian ad litem. So let's talk about a will. If you have not gone through the process either with an attorney or on your own to create a will, you have a will. The state of Missouri has provided a will to you. So anybody who passes away before they have created a will follow the intestate rules set forth by the state of Missouri. And those rules basically state that if you are a married person and you pass away and you have minor children, that your spouse will receive 50% of your assets and your children will receive the other 50%. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's illustrate that. Let's say that somebody passes away and they have $100,000 in a savings account. and they have a spouse and they have 3 kids. So when they pass away and they're the only person listed on that bank account, their husband or wife ends up with $50,000, and each of those 3 kids ends up with somewhere around $16,700, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? A third of the remaining $50,000. Now, one might think that, in my case, it would be my husband, right? So dad would just get this $50,000 for my 3 kids, who are now too old for this to really apply, but nonetheless, he would get this money and he would just take care of the kids. But the reality of the situation is, if that had happened in my life, my husband would have had to go to court to request that the court name him the conservator of those $16,700 for each one of his kids. And then he would actually have to report to the court on an annual basis with everything he's done for that with that money for those children. So it's really, really, really important that people have proper beneficiary designations or have created their own will, so that they don't get into the situation where really the state of Missouri becomes the next member of your family sitting at your kitchen table. A will is something that I probably should have said this first, and I apologize. A will is something that just basically tells the court system, tells the state of Missouri what you want to happen with your stuff when you're not here anymore. The other thing about a will that is highly misunderstood is that a will, if your assets are passing only via a will, those assets will go through probate. So some people have a misconception that if they have a will, that their estate will stay out of probate. The reality of the situation is any assets that pass just via a will go through probate. Probate is the process by which the court gets involved to say what happens to your stuff after you pass away. And I should tell you, I am not an attorney. I know enough to be very dangerous when it comes to the legal side of this information and how it would relate to our families. So it's around a $40,000 estate. If you should pass away and you have more than $40,000 in stuff, you are considered a large estate in Missouri, and you have to have an attorney involved to probate this estate and get it through the court system to get these assets transferred out to your family, your heirs. The attorney that would probate the estate would take a cut of that estate, and it's somewhere between 5 and 7%. So let's say 6. So on that $100,000 estate, that attorney just got a $6,000 paycheck. The executor, which is the last question here, what is the role of the executor? The executor is somebody that you name as the person that you want to be in charge of all of your stuff should you happen to pass away and your assets are passing via your will. So if you create your own will, you get to say, I want my spouse, or I want my sister, or I want my mom, or I want my cousin or my best friend to be the executor of my will. But if you haven't completed your will, the state of Missouri makes that determination for you. So it's really vital that people think about what's going to happen to my stuff when I pass away, and make sure that it's passing in the way that you want it to pass, and that you don't leave it up to the state of Missouri to make those determinations for you. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a trust. So a trust is a legal document that a person creates with the assistance of an attorney,
right,
to own or receive their assets. So for instance, we have, my husband and I, the Baker Family Trust. Our house is owned by the Baker Family Trust. Our investment accounts are owned by the Baker Family Trust. The Baker Family Trust is listed as a contingent beneficiary on our life insurance. And this trust is a legal entity that is created by typically a person or persons, more than one, could be a grantor or two grantors. And really the only purpose of this trust is to just own your stuff or hold your stuff. It's kind of like a shoebox. But the cool thing about a trust is that you can be very creative within a trust. So for instance, when we wrote our trust years ago, our oldest daughter, who is now a Mizzou graduate, told us that she was going to go to UCLA. Well, as we all know, if a kid from Missouri goes to UCLA, it's going to cost a lot of money. And so my husband and I wrote a stipulation within our trust that said, you know, if something would have happened to the two of us before Jenna had been in and out of Mizzou, that we would basically pay for the equivalent of the University of Missouri Columbia. So she could take her 20 grand and she could go to UCLA, but she wasn't going to take, 60 or 70 grand to go to UCLA, right? So you can do some really cool things within the body of a trust. Some people describe it as controlling your assets from the grave. There's some reality to that. You can make determinations on, if something happened to you and your kids were under the age of 18 or 25 or 30, you could still control when and how they would be able to receive assets of yours if you should happen to pass away. The other cool thing about a trust is that it avoids probate. So any assets that are passed via a trust at somebody's death do not go through probate, which means the attorney doesn't get his 6 or 7%, right? So you're reserving those assets within your family. The role of the trustee in the trust is typically when the trust is created. My husband and I are our own trustees. We are the grantors of the trust and we are the trustee of the trust. So we control the trust. When we both pass away, our oldest daughter will be our subsequent trustee. And so she would be the person who would carry out the instructions of those trusts when my husband and I are no longer here to do that. Okay. The other cool thing about a living trust is it's private. And I didn't mention this on probate, but probate is public. So if you have some of you will appreciate the reference. What's her name? Mrs. Kravitz on the Bewitched, the nosy neighbor who's, knows you're gone and wants to know how much stuff you had. If your estate goes through probate, she can look it up on the internet and find out everything you had when you died. The only people who have access to your trust are people that you've given access to your trust. It is a private document. Okay? Now, the things I'm sharing with you right now about wills and trusts are not specific to special needs. This is anybody. So if you've got, a brother or a sister who has young kids, whether they have a child with a disability or not, it's important for them to talk to some sort of an estate planning attorney and make sure that they've got their wills and their trusts set up as well. Where the situation becomes more interesting for those of us who have kiddos with Down syndrome is this very first question in the quiz. Have you left more than $2,000 to your dependent with special needs in a will or trust? The reason that this is so important is because oftentimes, I would say most every time, our kids, at least by the time that they turn 18, they are eligible to receive what we call needs-based Social Security benefit. And when I say needs-based, I'm saying NEEDS, means tested, needs-based Social Security income. And it's called Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. Kiddos who are 18 and above can request or apply, I should say, for supplemental security income in the state of Missouri, and their assets and their income are determined to be, or the determinations as to whether or not they're eligible to receive the supplemental security income. Prior to the age of 18, mom and dad's assets and income are used to determine if the individual with a disability is eligible for this SSI income. So oftentimes, if mom and dad both work, the child will not receive these SSI benefits until they're 18. So the reason that it's so important for those of us who are parents of individuals with disabilities to not leave any money to our child with a disability is because if they receive those assets and they have more than $2,000, they will lose those government benefits. Okay? So one possible solution to this is what we call a special needs trust. Now, a special needs trust is different than the Baker Family Trust or the revocable trust that we talked about earlier. The special needs trust is designed specifically for an individual who has a disability, who either is or may be on some sort of needs-based government benefit like supplemental security income or Medicaid. And what it does, honestly, is it removes these assets from eligibility criteria for that person and allows that person to qualify for these needs-based government benefits, even if there might be more than $2,000 available for their care. So, what in the world did I just say? I'm an open book. My son is 24. He began receiving supplemental security income when he was 18. We have a special needs trust set up for Derek. It's the Derek Baker Special Needs Trust. When my husband and I both pass away, that trust will be funded. There will be assets that go into that trust so that his sisters, although I expect them to be, burdened, if you will, by their brother, because I expect them to care for their brother and be a part of their brother's life for the rest of their lives. I don't want them to be financially burdened by taking care of their brother. So my husband and I have set up this special needs trust that will be funded when he and I both pass away, so that the girls will have assets available to take care of their brother, to take him on vacation, to bring him to the next WWE event that he just can't miss. Make sure he has a TV or, CDs or a new stereo when the old one breaks, whatever that is. I want to talk to you a little bit about Medicaid. Now, I recognize some of you folks that I saw pictures of earlier, and I know you have kids who are over 18 as well, and probably many of them are receiving supplemental security income and they are also on Medicaid. But there may be some of you who have younger kids and you haven't quite gotten as far into the system, if you will. Medicaid is it's really a health insurance program, right? It's a health insurance program for people who have limited means. In order to qualify for Medicaid, you can't have, and I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 in Missouri right now. Right now, Medicaid limit, and it hasn't been like this, but in the past, but right now the Medicaid limit is actually higher than the SSI limit. The Medicaid plan, for instance, will pay for glasses once every 3 years. A lot of our kiddos with Down syndrome wear glasses. So on the Medicaid plan, you get glasses in 2021, and then you don't get any more glasses again until you're in 2024, even if your prescription is changed. So a special needs trust can pay for those glasses in those 2 years that Medicaid won't cover it. The whole purpose of a special needs trust is not to replace anything the government will help our children with disabilities with. It's to do the things that the government benefits won't do. Okay. The other thing about Medicaid that is really vitally important to an adult with disabilities is it opens the window to all the programs. It opens the windows to the vocational programs. It opens the window to the transportation programs. It opens the window to the recreational programs, the residential programs. So even if you're thinking, you know, I got this great insurance, maybe I own my own company, I'm gonna, keep my kid on my insurance forever, you still want Medicaid, because Medicaid opens the doors for all of these other programs for adults with disabilities. Now, I'm going to touch on this a little bit, but I don't want to, veer off, totally in the weeds. There are different kinds of special needs trusts. The kind of special needs trust that I'm talking about that my husband and I set up for Derek is what I'm going to simply call a third-party special needs trust. And that means a third party set up the trust for the benefit of a person with a disability. So the third party, it's their money and they're making the rules. And that's the reason that the government doesn't look at these as eligible assets to consider qualification for the SSI and the Medicaid. The other thing that this does is it allows me to say what's going to happen to any money left in Derek's trust when Derek isn't here anymore. And the way that we have it set up right now, it goes to our daughters. There are other kinds of special needs trusts, but I'll talk to you individually if you have questions. But like I said, I don't want to muddy the waters too much. I'm referring to a third-party trust, typically that mom and dad set up for their child with a disability. So now we're going to talk about an ABLE. ABLEs are great. I want to say that up front. ABLEs are wonderful. ABLEs are a huge win for our community. But I don't, in my opinion, believe that an ABLE account replaces the need for a special needs trust. And here's why, and it's real simple. My son has an ABLE. He works and receives income. And so sometimes he gets too much money in his checking account. And when that happens, I push that money over to his ABLE account. The ABLE account is not a countable resource, so it doesn't impact, even though he's got more than $2,000 in his ABLE account, which he does, it doesn't impact his SSI and Medicaid. But the big difference between an ABLE and a third-party special needs trust, in that third-party special needs trust, the beneficiaries of that, anything left in that trust when Derek passes away, are my daughters. In Derek's ABLE account, if he passes away, the first beneficiary of that ABLE account is Missouri Medicaid.
That's right, Medicaid.
Back his bill. Okay, so in my opinion, I'm not putting my money in an ABLE account. I want my money to flow through a special needs trust that's going to stay in my family when Derek passes away. I don't want to put my money in an ABLE account that's going to go back to the state of Missouri. The other thing about ABLE accounts that make them more limited is that there's a maximum contribution per year, and it's $15,000. It basically tracks with the gift exclusion on an annual basis. So it'll probably go up, but it's never going to be as big as what the amount of money we're hoping to leave for Derek when my husband and I pass away. The other thing, if you do have a person, however, who is working, they can contribute the $15,000 plus up to like $12,000. It's on the bottom of the screen there, $12,760 of earned income. So ABLE accounts are fabulous. Like I said, they're big wins for families who have kids with special needs, especially those who work. But I'm not planning on putting my money into an ABLE account for Derek. When your child turns 18, he or she is considered a legal adult. And with that, he or she has the right to vote and get married and sign contracts and do all sorts of things. The doctors don't have to talk to you anymore. The school district doesn't have to talk to you anymore. You are no longer their legal guardian. Some families elect to petition the court for guardianship, and they feel that it's necessary for their child with a disability that mom or dad or sister or whomever is named as the legal decision maker for their loved one with a disability. And that's perfect for certain families. That's what they think is the best thing for them, and that's what they do. I had just personally a hard time after, being in the school district for all those years, telling everybody that Derek could do everything everybody else could do it. I had a hard time thinking I would go into court and tell a judge that Derek couldn't do everything everybody else could do. We elected not to seek guardianship for Derek. He is his own guardian. That has posed challenges. I'll tell you one, I'd like him to go to summer camp every year. And so when we apply for summer camp, he's got to sign it because he's his own guardian. And he tells me I'm not a baby, I shouldn't be going to summer camp. And so there's a little bit of negotiation that goes on. Some people are concerned, he could go out to, ABC rental company and buy, a 75-inch screen TV at 82% interest, and he could sign the paperwork, and that's all very true. Although he doesn't drive, so I'm not sure how he's going to get there because he doesn't really like to walk very much either, right? So it's something you need to decide when your child turns 18. And really, most attorneys say if you're going to petition for guardianship, you should start at about 17 and a half. I will tell you, UMKC, Institute for Human Development in Kansas City, has a great piece, at least they used to, and McKinney's shaking her head, so I'm assuming they still do. They have a great piece about guardianship on their site, and I would highly recommend that if this is something you're interested in, or your kid's getting close to this age, that you read their piece, because it's really excellent.
I started an ABLE account for my little guy, but his rep with the local deal where they get him services and what have you, had been kind of pushing me to go through a trust company to have a trust set up for him. Is that how I would do that?
So how old is your little guy?
He's 15.
Okay, he's 15. So does he work? Is he working or no?
No.
Okay.
He won't ever be able to do anything like that.
Okay. Well, it's not bad that you open an ABLE account. Okay. And, one of the things I didn't mention, which is really appropriate, is, if you ever have a child with a disability that comes into money because, great Aunt Nellie loves your, kiddo with Down syndrome and leaves them 10 grand. Right? That's his money, and throwing that into an ABLE account is very appropriate and very much the right thing to do. It's not a problem that you open an ABLE account. What I would say is, in my opinion, I wouldn't put a whole lot of my own money in there, Barbara. But it's nice.
I don't have a whole lot of money, so that's not an issue.
Okay. But it's nice to have that outlet if he ends up getting some money somehow, right? I think, certainly if you're able to leave something for him, a third-party special needs trust is probably a better vehicle to use, because then you decide what happens to the money when it's your grandson, right?
Right.
So you decide what happens to the money when your grandson isn't around to receive benefit from the trust anymore, versus the ABLE account, which is going to go back to the state. There are some what I call pooled trusts, which is maybe what your regional person is trying to direct you to. I think it's probably better if if you want to give me a call after this is over, you and I can just set up a time to Zoom and we can run through those weeds together.
Our son Daniel, he's a senior this year. He's 17. He's going to be turning 18 in February. We've known that we've needed to do something to pursue guardianship because Daniel just isn't going to be capable of doing things that independently. But we're really kind of unsure how and where we go to get started with that process.
There are multiple attorneys in the St. Louis area that work specifically in the special needs arena, and I highly recommend families that I work with that they make sure that they're working with an attorney who is really versed in this area. I liken it to this: if you were having a heart attack, you wouldn't go to a podiatrist. So as a family who has a individual with a disability, you really need to work with attorneys who are versed in special needs planning. So Mark, I have some names. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you all my contact information. So if you want to shoot me an email or call me and give me your email, I can send you over some attorneys that you can talk to that would get you started.
So
I would also highly recommend that you look up that guardianship piece on the UMAC website. It's really informative, and it really, I think it helps you understand what you're really doing. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just think people need to go in with eyes wide open, right? You need to be armed with information. And I think it's a great piece to really explain what guardianship is and what it does and what your responsibilities are, so that you know what you're getting into. The other thing that I would add to that, Mark, is I had a client one time. She actually had a son with autism, and she went through the guardianship process. He was pretty severely impacted by his autism, and she was his guardian. What she didn't do was she did not ask the court to make her the conservator. In the state of Missouri, guardians and conservators can be two different people and do two different things. The guardian is the guardian of the person. The conservator is kind of like the guardian of the money. And so attorneys don't always bring this up during the process, but I recommend to people that I speak to, if you're going to court to request to be the guardian of your child, also request to be the conservator of your child, even if they don't have anything. Because what happened to this particular mom was, the kid's now, 20, and she realizes grandma took out a life insurance policy on this young man when he was a baby. And there was a stipulation within the life insurance policy that said when the minor child turns 21, he or she automatically becomes the owner of this life insurance policy. Well, when he was to become the owner of this life insurance policy, he had $5,000, and that's a problem.
Lost his benefits for a while.
Exactly. And so because she wasn't the conservator, we worked around it another way, but she would have had to go back to court, pay the attorneys again to get the conservatorship. So I always tell families, if you're going to be the guardian, ask to be the conservator, just have them open it and close it. But it's like you're starting at letter M instead of starting at A, if something should come up in the future.
One thing that I wanted to add, Mark, is that the DSA has a listing of lawyers that have been recommended by other families.
I had a question. You had a list of alternatives to guardianship, and you talked about basically not being guardian, but what are the alternatives?
I apologize. The alternative that we selected, Anne, we actually had Derek sign a financial power of attorney.
Okay.
You have to have the right attorney to work with you on this. Basically, Derek was able to go in and say, I'm signing this so my mom can help me. We understood it at a very elementary level. Mm-hmm. Some attorneys I've talked to that work in special needs would not allow, they pretty much said, I wouldn't give a person with Down syndrome, I wouldn't sign off as if they were competent enough to sign it.
Also, I had a question about the ABLE account. So the ABLE account started in 2018. Is there any, we've called for some questions from the ABLE account administrators, and it's like calling the IRS. You call 3 times, you get 3 different answers. Has anybody had experience withdrawing money and using it, and how to use it, and anything like that?
It's very vague. So there are allowable expenses out of an ABLE account, but it's a very vague list. And it's kind of like I don't know if you had a 529, which is a college savings plan for any of your other kids. But it's very much like that. Unless you get audited, there's really nobody asking any questions. Now, am I telling you to take the money out and do something wrong? No, I'm not. But I haven't taken any money out of Derek's account since we've opened it. But certainly with my daughter's 529s, I took very, very good accounting for every dollar I spent that I took money out of their college savings plan. So if I am audited, I have proof of where the money went. And I think that, is you would want to look at the list of allowable expenses.
Okay.
And keep good records as far as what you're doing. And so if anybody comes back to audit that in the future, you know what in the world you did do. The next thing is have you identified a future care provider? So when Derek was little, he was crazy when we put him to bed. I mean, it was a production. I don't know if anybody has ever seen Pacifier with Vin Diesel, but it pretty much accurately described bedtime with Derek. There was a little baby, a little guy, he's probably 2 years old on the movie, and you had to do a certain dance and, sing a certain song and, turn these lights on and turn those lights off and do this or that, or the kid just wasn't going to bed. Well, that was Derek, right? And so, I knew that, and my husband knew that, and his older sister knew that, but, what if something had happened to all of us? Like, Derek probably never would have slept again. So the thing that we recommend to families is to do something called a letter of intent. A letter of intent is really just all that warm and fuzzy stuff that makes your kid, and would help your kid if something happened to his support system. So, back in the day, like running out of ketchup, that could not happen at my house. Now it's more barbecue sauce. Derek speaks for himself now though, so it's not as much of a big deal for him. But there's different ways that our kids deal with stress, and there's different ways that our kids unwind if they need to, and there's certain ways that they, want to, like I said, be put to bed or, this or that. And there's certain, there's a dentist in town. And of course, now Derek's 24, so he wouldn't go to a pediatric dentist, but there's a dentist in town that I never wanted to give another $1 to, right? All of those sorts of things were in my letter of intent. So imagine if your immediate family is gone, the real caregivers of this individual with a disability are not here to speak for him or her. Who's going to be able to pick up that ball and run it down to the end zone? Who's going to be able to care for your loved one? And so this is just all of that, that warm and fuzzy stuff. Different activities they're in, medicines they take, maybe some medicine that they had a bad reaction to. The coach for Special Olympics, how they reach them, just all of those things that are so vitally important to the quality of life of our kids. And it's the less that your loved one can speak and advocate for himself or herself, the more important this type of roadmap really is.
I just wanted to say on the letter of intent, so what we're doing today, All Things Financial, is part of a section, part of a whole group of things called Secure Futures. And we have All Things Legal, which is about more in depth about guardianship and Medicaid and those kinds of things. We then have All Things Financial, Miss Valerie, and then we have our Letter of Intent. And we have a mom that does it, and she is fantastic at doing it. So look for it sometime later, about maybe February or March of next year, as well as be on the lookout for All Things Legal. But in the meantime, you can go to the DSA's, not Facebook page, but YouTube page, and there is a Letter of Intent workshop very similar to this. So if you'd like to see a little bit more about how to put together, she puts together a notebook. It's not just, it's wonderful.
The last part is really about funding the trust. So you go through this work, you work with an attorney, you get a special needs trust put in place, you want to leave money behind for your child with a disability. What do you put in it? And the reality of the situation is you can put anything in a trust, right? Any sort of property can be owned by a trust. But you need to think about how does that translate into resources for your child. So for instance, if you want to leave your home to your child with a disability, that's great. You could leave your home to your child with a disability within a special needs trust. But you need to make sure there's money in there too to take care of that home, right? Because we all know owning a house is not free. Even if it's paid off, owning a house is not free. You can put investments in there. You can put retirement funds in there. You can put life insurance in there. So any asset can be put into a trust. But you have to think beyond just getting it in the trust. How is it going to really help my kid? You could put artwork in there or a baseball card collection. But if you have a stipulation that you can't sell the artwork or you can't sell the baseball card collection, well, it's probably really not going to help your child with a disability. So this comes to the last question of the quiz. Have you left anything to your dependent with special needs purposely or maybe not purposely? Beneficiary designations can be tricky. In the past, it's not as bad as it used to be, but in the past, on life insurance applications, there was a box that you could check where, husband would list wife as the primary beneficiary, and they would check a box that says all children of this marriage. Same thing. Wife lists husband as primary beneficiary and then checks a box that says all children of this marriage. Well, if my husband and I did that, then we just named Derek as a contingent beneficiary on our life insurance policy. It wasn't as prevalent, I don't think, in the financial world, as like 401ks, annuities, IRAs, those sorts of things that you are typically asked to provide a beneficiary designation for. But it's possible that you could have an old, 401k out there where you named your spouse and then checked a box and said my kids as contingent beneficiaries. So all of those things should be reviewed to make sure that you haven't inadvertently named your child with a disability as a beneficiary, because again, more than $2,000 interrupts their government benefits. So oftentimes families elect to use life insurance to create an estate where maybe there isn't already an estate. A lot of us, we think of an estate and we're thinking, Bill Gates or the Rockefellers or Kennedys or something like that. But really, the cool thing about life insurance is you can pay a small premium on a monthly basis or annual basis. We all know we're going to pass away. And so we know at the time that we die that there will be a death benefit paid into a trust for our loved one with a disability. But there's different kinds of life insurance, and I think there's permanent life insurance and there's term or temporary life insurance. When I work with families on their special needs plan, I encourage them to use a permanent plan of insurance for funding their trust if that's the method that they elect to fund the trust. because I try to couple the need we're trying to protect with insurance that's going to be there. And if I put a term policy in place for you and you're 30 years old and you buy a 20-year term, it's not real likely you're going to pass away before you're 50. Am I telling you I don't like term insurance? Absolutely not. But I think that if you have to couple or marry the type of insurance to the need that you have. If it's a permanent need, we try to fund it with permanent life insurance. If it's a temporary need, like I want my house paid off, or if I die before I'm retirement age, I want to replace my income, then you can use a temporary product for that. A lot of families, and this is actually the method that my husband and I elected, a lot of families use what's called survivorship life insurance to fund a special needs trust. This is sometimes referred to as a second to die life insurance policy. So it covers typically mom and dad. It doesn't have to be mom and dad, but oftentimes it covers mom and dad. It only pays when the second of the two passes away. And the reason that we like this strategy for funding a special needs trust is because typically, as long as either mom or dad are alive, the kid with a disability is going to be okay, right? But when the second one passes away, you want to have that cash flow coming into the special needs trust so that the subsequent care providers have money to fund whatever needs to be funded. And most times it is going to be less expensive to get a second to die life insurance policy on two people than it is to just get a life insurance policy on one person. And you have to look at that from the life insurance company's perspective. It's very unlikely that my husband and I will both pass away prematurely, but it's a much higher likelihood that one of us could. And so that's why those premiums are typically less for that second to die life insurance policy. The other consideration that people need to think about is long-term care for the caregiver. So if your plan is to keep your child with Down syndrome in your home until you pass away, what's going to happen if you can't care for yourself? So it's a consideration that some people should take a look at on how do I make sure that I can stay in my home long enough to care for my then adult child who has Down syndrome. This just talks a little bit more about long-term care. If anybody wants to have discussions about that, I'm available to do that. So how do you start this planning process? I tell people start today because tomorrow is often the busiest day of the week. It's so easy to put this stuff off. Nobody likes to think about what's going to happen to my kids if I'm not here. But when you add the consideration of having a child with a disability, it's even worse. And I get it. Because I have my own child with a disability. It's really important that you work with both attorneys and financial planning people who understand special needs planning. I often say that a bad plan is better than no plan. And in a typical family, that's probably true. But in a family who has a kid with special needs, a bad plan could be a really bad problem.
I have a question about Medicare as we age as parents, and do you know at what point our kids can go on Medicare?
There is, I think they have to receive SSDI, so there is a difference between SSI, which is what Derek is on, and SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Income. If mom or dad or perhaps guardian was disabled and they were receiving, if mom or dad were receiving SSDI, after a period of time, they automatically become eligible for Medicare. I think it's 2 years. And so then your adult child with a disability could potentially also become available or eligible for Medicare. But when we're working, when mom and dad are working and the kid's 24, that's not going to happen at that time.
Okay, but my question is really, I think hopefully all of us will advance
Retire
to 65 and retire. And at what point? And SSDI. Also, do you know how much our kids have to have earned to qualify for SSDI? I know.
Well, you have to have 40 quarters.
Yeah.
You have to have 40 quarters of earnings. So that's like 10 years work history.
Okay.
And it's not, I don't know that there's a dollar amount necessarily, but your benefit will be based upon your earnings. So if your earnings are very low, your benefit could be lower than just receiving the supplemental security income. I am a special care planner. I can help. Like I said initially, I'm happy to talk to anybody complimentary to get more into the weeds with you on your situation and more on mine if there's more questions you have about mine. But this is about the quality of care, right? We want to make sure that our kiddos are taken care of for their lifetime. And, thank goodness for medical advancement. Our kids are living longer than us, and that's the way it's supposed to be.